This is not the point where you're like, now I got it. And you don't pause it here and grind something out when it's a 1 rep max. It just looks like it's a little too forced to make it look harder than it really is. Hey GQ, this is Julian Smith. We're looking at weightlifting scenes again. Back with part 2. This is the breakdown. First up, Rocky Balboa. That's what I love about like the Rocky training montages, because he's already like, he's struggling, he's not really kicking ass, but what he's struggling with is already like super hard stuff. So we already know that once he gets going and he's struggling with the overhead press, he's struggling with the rows, he's struggling with all the kettlebell movements, you know by the end of this montage he will be kicking ass at everything. But it's already difficult moves that I'm seeing. Also will say, training for boxing is very specific than bodybuilding training, but when you get in here and you have certain movements that go back to bodybuilding in regards to overhead pressing and certain movements and rows, bodybuilding critiquing that can be beneficial in this situation. That looked a little fake to me, to be completely honest. So he's winding back with that sledge and he's hitting the tire like we've seen in previous videos, but right before he hits the tire, it's like he slows up. I mean, when you're hitting that tire, you're supposed to be swinging all out. You want to go intense, swinging, hitting it as hard as possible. And when you watch this clip where he's about to swing into it, it looks like he kind of lets up, which is just not something you would do. The move where he's slamming the beer keg on the ground, that seems a little strange. I'm sure they're trying to say he doesn't have all the cool things like a kettlebell. That's always what they do with Rocky, is like, Rocky doesn't have the cool training facility. He's got basic weights. For him to slam like a beer keg down on the ground, I mean, metal on cement, it would just be breaking the hell out of everything in there, and not the way that it would normally be done. This is one of the biggest pet peeves ever. So he steps out of a squat rack. There's no safety anywhere, which is, in my opinion, is saying he's about to do this and rock it out. All set up, lots of sweat, ready to go. And then right before he does his squat, he does a little push up. You doing a little tiny jump up on a squat when you already have so much weight and the point is to go down and up, that extra movement is just exerting energy that you don't need to exert. So getting set up, stepping out 1-2 steps, situating yourself, and then going down and up is how he would do that, not stepping out and just kind of doing that little jump up first. The eggs thing is, I mean, I used to do that when I was younger. It wasn't like that, and I probably did it twice, and I was like, I'm never doing it again. You know, they're just trying to make it as hardcore as possible, and drinking eggs, I don't recommend, but I mean, obviously sets the vibe for what we're going for here. That was a little strange, I'll be honest. So, it's always squatting because it's not that last little bit at the top. People who squat know that you're not going to get, like, have just the tiniest amount of bend in your legs and not be able to stand up a little bit. You never see his range of motion. You never see how far he goes down. It just shows him struggling when he's almost like a couple inches away from like a max range of motion at the top anyway. So it just kind of looks like loading weight up and standing up to make it look like you finished it. It's a lot of weight that he's using. 5 plates, 495. Just that little bit, I mean, it just looked a little overly produced to me. So actually in like powerlifting and stuff, they won't have those safety bars underneath like you would see in like a bodybuilder. Like, see how he's completely stepping away and there's nothing? When you powerlift, you step away and they move the thing away from you, so it's 100% on you. And there's guys who will spot you, but the idea is this guy should be doing a weight that he could probably get on his own, and if he doesn't get it, the guys all around can apply a little bit of a pressure to that weight and help him get it up. The issue is people might go way too heavy on all that, and you think, man, I got all these guys around me, but what if you're not even close to that weight, and then you put all that pressure on the people spotting you, which they're not aware of. So in this situation, it looks all normal. That's something you would see in like a powerlifting setup. You know, the guys on the outside, guy in the back, that's common. But just that little push at the end is the only thing that looked a little iffy to me. The weight belt, you don't want it overly too cinched down. You just want it so you can force your abdomen, push it out into it, tighten your ab wall, help straighten your spine, help give you that good posture and keep that form throughout. Knee wraps around your knees just to help for a little support as well. It all looks very, very common, even with the wrist wraps up there. You know, squatting is one of the most bread and butter exercises. That with a deadlift and a bench press. You want to see the champ doing champ stuff. Having him with a lot of weight like this is all we're doing to set the tone of this movie or this build-up scene. So here's my thing with like the whole age training. If you've never done bodybuilding once in your life and you're like, hey, I'm gonna get into weightlifting at 75 years old, there's great benefits to it, but I would never sit there and say, oh, a guy is 60, he couldn't lift this. People are strong, and it's based off of, you know, how they are and what they've done their entire life. Anybody could go into a gym with probably 5-pound weights and do those very similar punching moves, but those dumbbells kind of look like they're 60, 70, 80 pounds, so it comes down to like how strong is this guy. If you're actually doing form the right way, certain muscles will be turning on and the other ones won't. So you can't see a lot of that with this filming because he's so covered up, but everything looks pretty spot on. In regards to how covered up he is, that's not like, oh man, they covered him up because, you know, he's older. They covered him up because that's like a boxy building training thing. I train with a beanie sometimes like in the summer too, just like getting that extra heat, warm up, multiple layers. It's just to get you extra heated up and get that sweat going. In this scene, you can always tell when someone's doing something authentically if the muscles are firing. Pull-ups, those look spot on. Full range of motion for the first rep, and then you see him going chin above the bar, form on it, elbows pointed. Wrist positioning on that can change how much your biceps are actually engaged on like a pull-up. So if you pull like this, you can get a lot of bicep activation. Pulling like this, it just turns everything, you know what I'm saying? So in regards to what he's doing, there's people that do chin-ups, pull-ups, wide grip pull-ups, you do pull-ups behind the neck. All these slightly different angles can just change a pull-up a little bit. Here's something that I've noticed about when he's overhead pressing 315, meaning three 45s on each side, and then there's a 45-pound bar. That's a lot of weight to be overhead pressing. To get into this position and have that bar sitting here, he has it elevated slightly out in front of his chest and above his shoulders the entire time. If he is actually doing that, that's an extremely difficult thing to do. Most people would get that up and let it sit across them right here, and then get into that position where they shoot it over their head. They wouldn't get it up like this because, in my opinion, something that's very light, you would lift it up and you'd be able to support it and then you'd be able to push it up. But if somebody told you to lift a weight that you don't normally do, you would lift it to this position and you would be resting it somewhere in here and then pressing up. I see a lot more into supporting it right here during this movement. It just seems like it's a little too lax for him for how heavy that weight is. I see more of Olympic weightlifting in this, pulling from the ground and then overhead pressing. They almost built up that entire training scene for that one lift. So that was a very, very important part of that they centered everything around him overhead pressing 315. One thing that I've always admired about the CrossFit world and the powerlifting world and Olympic weightlifting, anything where someone's achieving or going after like records or personal best, you have that camaraderie. It's not like everybody's over there just trying to beat you. Everyone's trying to beat their own personal record. In those communities, when you finally lift that much, you might have beat the guy next to you, but he's stoked because he's got his own records that he's going for, so you'd probably turn around and everyone's stoked for you. It's a very cool part of like the powerlifting, Olympic lifting scene. So in regards to Rocky Balboa, I love the training. It's your classic Rocky scene. They want him to be larger than life. They want him to lift, stuff that a normal person can, and they want him to be the coming from behind and kicking ass with limited equipment and still doing it. So it's kind of like the American dream. You start from nowhere and you get your way to the top, and they paint it well in this entire video. Everything that he's doing, this guy doesn't not know how to work out. You've seen him in any of his stuff, and he trains hard. Next up, we got Dodgeball, a true underdog story. Alright, so just like right off the bat, it's only showing like the last 2 or 3 inches of range of motion, which you're going to have to assume that he went full range of motion and did that rep, because all you're really seeing is him, racking and being like, did it. A lot of people say, back up, I got this on my own. But one thing that is fun about being a personal trainer, and one thing that people need to realize, is you have to shape-shift your training style for what that person wants. Some people might not get motivated by just being there and doing all this stuff, so you got to start finding different ways. As funny as this stuff is, it's like, I totally get it, because if you're in those weird moods and you're trying to get that workout and you want anything possible, and obviously he went a little overboard. So he's on a Smith machine squatting. Totally fine, normal exercise for legs, right? But he's having a hard time. This is obviously a joke, but if you're critiquing form, he's struggling on this squat, and on the way up, he finally gets it, and then a weight that his legs couldn't handle, he then shoulder presses to lock it in. So your legs, glutes, hamstrings, some of the biggest muscles in your body, those three combined make some of the strongest muscles in general. So you're gonna lift the most with your legs. So if he can't even get this weight up with his legs, how is he finishing out the rep and then shoulder press locking it out? Pretty unrealistic. They just wanted to be as over the top as possible.
Involuntary spasm. Look at the show. Join the show.
Obviously, don't see a lot of people having involuntary spasms and calling it out like that, but I've been to a number of gyms in my life where there's been some pretty hilarious characters. What he's like doing is basically saying he's worked himself out so hard that his muscles are spasming and he can't control it. One thing that's actually cool about Ben Stiller, I know they're making a total joke of him, but he's in great shape for this movie. So what's actually pretty funny about this whole scene at like Globo Gym, it looks very similar to like that Sun Gym clip from Pain and Gain, where it kind of looks like 70s and 80s, a lot of purple. They got the leotards, the wrestling singlets that they're training in. In the background, look at the background. He's got a bunch of pictures of his face. And then I think that's a picture of a guy doing like a back double bicep, but it's just his butt cheeks and his calves in the background. So that's like gym motivation for a gym bro. He is making a joke about what he's doing, but his physique screams that it's not a joke. You can make a funny face with your handlebar mustache all you want, Ben Stiller, but I see that you put in some pretty serious work for dodgeball. Next up, teddy bear.
2, 3, 2 more, 4, 1 more, please.
All right, I've seen 2 seconds of this clip and these guys look incredible. When you get a bodybuilder, like full-blown bodybuilders, they're not gonna mess up on their form. You see 2 reps already, full range of motion, flat bench dumbbell flies, and they look perfect. Also, one thing that I wanted to say is you notice a guy training, doing proper form, getting his workout in, and his spotter counting his reps as well. It's a very common thing you would see with like bodybuilders, although bodybuilding is not a group activity, but you can definitely lean on the other guys going through that journey with you to help you. And that's when you have the camaraderie of somebody being there to make sure you train and do the things that you set out to do, even if you don't want to do it. That's a dumbbell pullover. He's letting his air out, that he's starting to exert some energy. You could tell it's a lot of weight. I mean, these guys look like very, very, very seasoned bodybuilders, so they're getting in there and they're activating the necessary muscles with these movements. You can see it when he's doing the pullover. His chest, the secondary muscles that are trained as well, they're just starting to fire because he's actually doing the movement correctly. I actually really like this whole clip because they got the calm music in it. If you put some pretty intense music behind this, I think it would paint the perfect picture of like, oh, 2 guys super into their workouts, that's all they care about. But it's pretty interesting how you can just have a slightly different music change, and it almost makes the entire thing more calm, more thought out, a little bit more specific to what they're doing, and in a controlled environment, which a lot of people in bodybuilding think it's all aggressive and explosive and screaming. These guys are lifting very controlled and putting in work with respect to everybody else in the gym. It's all about finding what can get you into the zone, because for about an hour to 2 hours, depending on what you're training, you're basically just putting your body through pain. And once you can understand that the pain is the good part of this whole thing, and the pain is what gets you feeling good, it's what changes your body. You know, you start seeing those changes and what gets you more stoked about it, so you continue doing it.
Put it up like that instead of like this. Yeah, sit it up. Perfect.
This is a cool part of this scene because they're getting into posing, and that's honestly probably the one thing that brings bodybuilders together is the posing aspect and displaying your physique as well as possible, because there's some people that have an eye for it. I have a couple buddies that are great at posing, and I'm not. And I would go to those guys to help me. So you have the bigger dude with the tattoos talking to the other guy, and they're both posing, but they're kind of swapping critiques back and forth like, hey man, drop this, do this. What's really difficult about posing is you can look in the mirror and do all this stuff, but you want almost like an audience's opinion of your physique every time you go to the gym. Let's say you're posing and it's just you and you have a buddy. He could be seeing things like, if you lean back a little bit further, it's going to make your back closer to the audience, which is going to make your hips be more out in front of you, which makes your back look wider and your waist look smaller. Without seeing anything else in the movie, these guys are helping each other strive to be better. Up next, Flashdance. All this stuff looks, for the era, pretty spot on. There wasn't a lot of women bench pressing and squatting and doing all this. It was more of like this style of training, but the curls, everything they're doing, like the little over to the side concentration curls, all looks spot on. That was a lying leg curl machine, which she was contracting back up towards her glutes. All the machines are different. You couldn't look at that and say, oh, that's 40 pounds. That's got to be, you know, so much weight, because just because the little stickers are on there, it's just giving those people something to like track off of. She's making it look difficult, but you could tell she's doing a little bit more acting than actually like putting in work, because everybody who's trained hard and like actually put in work like that, you don't really look cute. Usually when you're putting in work and it's actually hard, that's when you have like the ugliest face on. The era that they're in, there's some old school bodybuilding books that have a lot of movements that like these girls might have done for their training back in the day, and it's just not something or commonly seen nowadays. So just because a lot of people see what they're doing and being like, why would you know, do a dumbbell and let it come down and touch your knees? That might have been an actual movement for that era. Can't knock a lot of the old school stuff because we got what we got from the old school, but to be sitting there and doing your classic bull during a lift and having enough time to talk during your workout, it's just means you're not putting in that much work.
Oh, I don't think so, Alex. You're calm.
So there's two different movements going on. So you have this woman, she stands up and then from the standing up position then does a shoulder press. There's no weight because those bars stay right there. So if she squats down past that, there's no weight on her. So that little squat that she was doing has nothing to do with the press that she's doing. The girl who responds back saying he'll call, I think she's just doing a sit-up. So she's going from a down position going up. She's on like a white backdrop. She's not even in a gym right now. So she's in space working out. When you have like actors, they always zoom in because they want to make it as like flawless as possible. This is like an entire training montage of just people's faces pretending to train. And then you see a little bit of them working out. But when you get somebody who's like an Arnold Schwarzenegger who trains, and then there's an opportunity to put training into the video, they're like, I worked hard for this. We're going to make this look perfect. These guys were probably just trying to get through what they could. There's a big misconception of how females should train in regards to like males. The women who say, I don't want to lift weights because I don't want to bulk up and look like a bodybuilder, never will. They're judging probably some girl or guy who's trained for 20 years. You can lift heavy, lift hard, you won't get bulky. Let's say you're training to get ready for dancing and you don't want massive shoulders and you want to get in shape. That comes from bodybuilding training. If you want to improve on certain areas and you want to, sculpt your physique and lose a little weight, you just need to diet. If you want to put on a little bit of muscle, you need to start training and you need to be in a surplus of calories. Those are the two ways to go about it. And just remember, everything takes a long time. Most women who get in there and they start lifting heavy as they should and start training hard, they'll be the first person to start clapping back. That whole thing was a myth about lifting too much and bulking too fast as a woman. It's quite the opposite. Up next, we got I Love You Man.
Why are you being such a chicken? He gave you his card. It's an open invitation. Engage your core. It's beach season. It's beach season. I hate this. There's no rules for male friendship.
All right, so at this point in I Love You Man, we got Peter walking in to see his brother who's training one of his clients, and Peter's asking him for advice on a guy that he's going to go see and hang out with. It's a very urgent time. He's trying to find the best man. Obviously more of like a no-no for a trainer. The guy's literally doing sit-ups. These types of things can happen. Not getting the attention you need for well-paid-for gym trainings.
Look, if he does call, no more dinners, okay? It's sending the wrong message. I know.
Hey, Peter! I got an extra ticket to the Galaxy game tonight!
So we got the guy with the funny voice who's giving everything he got, but you stop to focus on the guy who's benching and the guy who's squatting in the background. The guy who's squatting in the background does about a third rep, not even a quarter. It's almost like they said, hey man, we want you to squat, but he had been doing stuff enough where he's been exhausted, so he's not doing a full squat. The guy who's doing the talking back and forth with the funny voice is 100% disregarding the guy who's bench pressing, and when you see him finally do it, it looks like the guy was going for like a 1 rep max because he's like forcing him to do it. Pinky's man, everything he got. So a little more attention on there probably would have been better for a spotter. A seasoned bench presser, when they come down, it's going to look a little bit more smooth. As this guy comes down, you can see like the weight is shifting around. It makes me think that's not correct weight. I'm sure it's just fake plates. It's probably a fraction of what that should be. And what this guy is doing is lowering it really slow, probably mentally putting what he thinks struggle should look like into that. So he's doing all these things to make it look hard. In reality, you wouldn't do that. You would be more stuck in for a 1 rep max than anything, and it would look a lot smoother. The guy has decent setup before, relatively good grip. He brings it down, he starts struggling. The spotter is so far back, his hands are out here. When he's saying, I'm gonna give it pinkies, imagine if somebody had a 1 rep max weight and you had to spot them. Would you lean all the way back so your fingers that have zero, like nothing going on, could really lift the weight? Or would you get over the top of it so when you need to spot him, you can engage stronger muscles like your back, your legs, and everything, so you could lift up something that was gonna hurt somebody? So he's sitting there saying pinkies. We do that all the time in bodybuilding. You'll sit there and say, hey man, I need a spot. You want somebody there in case something goes wrong. But if you truly want somebody to spot you, like hands on, it's none of that pinky stuff. You want somebody close, you want somebody to help you, because if you don't get it, pinkies will not lift a bench press weight off of somebody. So I've actually had somebody spot me like this incorrectly. When that happened to me, someone was standing in that position, and when I was failing on an incline press, instead of pulling it straight up, which is what would happen if you were over the top of the bar, he was leaning back. So when he couldn't lift it himself, he started pulling the weight up, but towards him, and it yanked my shoulders back. So form spots on this is everything. And in regards to the guy who's bench pressing, you got to be set up. You want that grip. You want to squeeze that bar as hard as possible, not start failing, realizing how hard it is, and then start like letting go of your grip or picking a foot up off the ground to help squiggle around to get that weight up. You're in proper form for a reason, so you should be maintaining form. You shouldn't make any of these exercises hard by your face. The weight and the load that you're about to like move is what makes the exercise difficult. So when the weight is legit and it's real, everything just looks a lot different. Thanks so much for watching, guys.